COPWATCH, policing the police every single day.
It's not good enough. Okay? There's 4 things I want to do. I want better training for the prosecutors, tougher sentences for repeat offenders, which is a problem we have these days, and working close with law enforcement. And the 4th thing I'll do, I won't have my political opponent arrested and thrown in jail.
Corruption at its worst. State attorney candidate blames opponent for his arrest. By Ann Easker. Staff writer. After starting the week with a stint in jail, state attorney candidate Chris Crowley took to the Lee County Courthouse steps Tuesday to proclaim the corruption of the current regime. Amira Fox will say and do anything to get elected in this case, including having her political opponent who she's afraid of being thrown in jail, Crowley said. That's wrong, and no one should tolerate that. Crowley was arrested Monday for violating election laws and conducting an illegal raffle. The charges stem from a campaign event in June hosted by members of the Animal Welfare Advocates of Southwest Florida. A raffle at the event raised $670, which. Sun photo by Jerry Beard. Candidate Chris Crowley claims the state attorney's office for the 20th Judicial Circuit is corrupt for engineering his arrest. Crowley returned a week later after asking the Florida Elections Commission whether he was legally allowed to keep the funds. State Attorney Stephen Russell referred the case to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in June and asked Governor Rick Scott to assign any prosecutorial duties to another state attorney, due to his own conflict of interest. Russell has endorsed and actively campaigns in support of Crowley's opponent, Chief Assistant State Attorney Amira Fox. The case was filed by the 10th Circuit State Attorney's Office. In the press conference Tuesday, Crowley railed against Russell and Fox, highlighting the recent acquittal of members of the Lake Boys gang, which Crowley claims was rushed to trial for political reasons, and the many dropped charges of Wisner Desmerid prior to his fatal shooting of Fort Myers police officer Adam Jobbers Miller. The state attorney's office, Steve Russell and Amira Fox, thought a high priority was a raffle for $670 where the money was returned 7 days later, Crowley said. That's their priority, is a raffle, not a cop killer, not a dangerous gang, a bunch of racketeers, according to the charges, but a $670 raffle. That's pathetic and that's corruption. Crowley stated he agreed to enter a diversion program to deal with the charges. The 6-month contract requires him to pay various fines and make a report to a Department of Corrections probation officer once a month. Why did I do that? He asked. Well, yeah, I participated in a raffle. But originally I was threatened. Crowley claims in an initial meeting, Assistant State Attorney Jerry Hill, who Crowley claims is a friend of Russell's, told him to drop out of the race. He threatened me in front of a witness saying, "You get out of this race or we're going to indict you with a grand jury," Crowley said. We said nonsense to that. Then they came back a day later and said, "Well, if you just pay a fine and fill out a contract, we'll dismiss the case," and that's what we agreed to. Crowley's attorney, Ron Smith, described the meeting in somewhat gentler terms, without naming specific prosecutors at the meeting. The opening posture was that they would not resolve the case with diversion or withhold of adjudication unless he would drop out of the race, Smith said. Assistant State Attorney Jacob Orr, the 10th Circuit prosecutor who filed the charges, said the idea that the office was politically motivated is ridiculous. We don't care who the state attorney is in the 20th Judicial Circuit, he said. We were assigned the case by Governor Rick Scott. We looked at the facts. The facts showed a crime. The crime wasn't all that egregious, and we resolved it. It couldn't have gone better for him than this other than if we didn't file, but we felt we had an obligation to charge him. Orr said he was not present in the initial meeting with Crowley or his attorney but said Crowley's claims don't make sense. Crowley would be facing the same charges if he'd been indicted, and if they truly wanted him out the race, they could have made the process much worse for him by having police pick him up and inviting media to attend. Instead, the office informed Crowley before filing the charges, arranged a time for him to turn himself in, and agreed to the diversion contract. While Orr said the office technically could have chosen not to file the case, they tend to avoid subjective filing decisions. "We have evidence before us a crime has been committed," he said. "When we can prove a felony, we tend to file it. It's not the crime of the century, which is why we entered negotiations early and entered an agreement." Orr said Jerry Hill did have some involvement with the case but is not friends with Stephen Russell. Hill himself was not available for comment. Samantha Sion, a spokeswoman for the state attorney's office, said Russell knows Hill but has not spoken to him in approximately 2 years. However, Crowley insists Russell abused his power by asking FDLE to investigate the charges. He brought to the press conference a letter he sent to Governor Scott's office on July 2, asking for Russell to be removed from office on the grounds of malfeasance, misfeasance, neglect of duty, incompetence, and permanent inability to perform official duties. The letter discusses the failure of the office to prosecute alleged animal cruelty cases in Lee County, the lack of prosecution for the shooter of Ryan Modale, which was deemed a stand-your-ground case, and the failure to procure a grand jury indictment in the homicide of Matthew Walker at the Charlotte Correctional Institution. Allowing Stephen B. Russell to remain in office is a clear threat to public safety for the people of Southwest Florida, the letter concludes. Russell refers criminal investigations to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for political gain, refuses to prosecute large-scale animal cruelty, inappropriately tampers with the grand jury process and refuses to prosecute the murder of Ryan Modale. Unfortunately, the only appropriate solution is to immediately suspend Stephen B. Russell from the position of State Attorney for the 20th Judicial Circuit of Florida. A spokesperson for the governor's office stated the complaint had been received but did not indicate whether any action would be taken. Crowley also brought a complaint he stated he hand-delivered to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, claiming members of the state attorney's office, including Fox, regularly participate in cash gambling pools for March Madness, the Super Bowl, and fantasy football leagues. "I hope the 10th Circuit gets the case, and they'll probably have to put Ms. Fox and Mr. Russell into a diversion program and pay a fine," Crowley said. "What's good for the geese is good for the gander, I believe the saying goes." A spokesperson for Fox sent a brief response from her regarding Crowley's statements about his arrest. The case was investigated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, who found probable cause for an arrest warrant. An arrest warrant issued by the state attorney's office, 10th Judicial Circuit, who was assigned to handle this case by Governor Rick Scott. I, neither as Chief Assistant State Attorney nor as a candidate, have had any involvement in this case. Email, aeasker@sun-herald.com. Police use who may want to retaliate against him physically.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use. And also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, you know, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon, Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.